Opinions expressed by the host of this show are his and his alone. They do not reflect those of this network, his employer, any of the universities he attended, his family and friends, or former roommates, any of the 5 Temptations, the 4 Tops, or any number of the Pips. They may or may not reflect those of the other voices in his head. His dog, however, agrees with him 100%. And now, broadcasting from Venture X Studios in Frisco, Texas, it's the Snarky Parenthetical. Here's your host. He's highly caffeinated and mildly irritated. Here's Lathan Watts.
All right, welcome to the Snarky Parenthetical. Glad to have you all back. Glad to have Stan the Man back in the room.
Back on the scene.
Back from assignment. Last week his day job got in the way. Can't imagine having your priorities so misplaced. Actually wanted to earn a living. Clearly, we need to work on that. But
yeah, got it mixed up. That's for sure.
Yeah, you know it happens.
My heart was here. That's for sure.
Definitely. Yeah. And I'm sure you listened and have plenty of things to say about last week.
Oh, that's for sure.
Before we get into that, today's show brought to you by Schrute Farms.
All right.
If you have never been to a quaint little bed and breakfast on a working beet farm, you need to add that to your bucket list, I think. I mean,
Definitely.
It's right outside of beautiful, historic Scranton, Pennsylvania. The owner...
Number one tourist stop in the whole country, I hear.
I mean, it's got to be way up there. Mm-hmm. The Scranton Chamber of Commerce, I'm sure, is promoting it heavily.
Oh, yeah.
The owner, proprietor, a little bit eccentric.
You could say that.
Which just adds to the charm, in my opinion.
For sure.
He's
passionate about his beats.
Definitely.
That's for sure.
Definitely. Beats. Was it Beats?
Oh, Bears,
Beats, and Battlestar Galactica.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah. All three of those excellent topics of conversation with the owner-proprietor if you ever visit Schrute Farm. So there we go. There's today's sponsor. All right. Let's get into it. First segment, we do some news stuff. So let's start with this headline. New Jersey woman locked in 7-year battle with the IRS to prove she is indeed alive. Okay. Yes. That's
a unique problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Samantha Dreisig, I believe is how you would pronounce her last name, who is a summer camp counselor and 25 years old. She has, according to the story, an important outlook. Life is short. You never know when it's going to end. And apparently hers ended 7 years ago and nobody told her. But apparently somebody told the folks at the IRS. She said, the last actual person I spoke to at the IRS, and I quote, "Wow, you're dead all over our system." So imagine saying that to the person you're talking to. Oh, yeah, you're clearly dead. You're clearly dead. And when I first read the headline, I'm like, why are you fighting this? The IRS thinks you're dead. You don't owe them any taxes if you're dead.
Right.
Like, this is maybe not something you should bring up to the IRS. They think you're dead. Hey, then, okay, I'm dead. I don't owe you anything, right?
That almost seems like a fantasy situation.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
what you want.
I'm pretty sure that's why Elvis faked his death, right? There's one for the conspiracy theorists. But then I read a little more into the story, and it makes sense why she's actually trying to convince them that she's alive. It says this is now causing problems for her father's tax returns because the IRS is saying he's trying to claim as a dependent someone who is deceased. Okay, so he's still claiming her on his tax returns, trying to lower his tax bill, and the IRS is saying, no, she's dead.
That makes sense. Okay.
Which brings me to another point. I mean, not to be too harsh on this one, but you're 25 years old and you're working as a camp counselor, and dad's still claiming you as a dependent. It's time to get a real job. Mm-hmm. Okay, she's probably not paying taxes, which is why it's not a big deal for her. Right. But it is a big deal for dad. Well, Dad, she's 25. Okay, at some point, you're going to lose the ability, even though you are clearly supporting her. At some point, you're going to lose the ability to claim this person on your taxes anyway. So maybe it's time to just bite the bullet, right? And then if she gets a real job and the IRS still thinks she's dead, she gets to keep all that money, and maybe she can start paying you back for all the room and board and whatever useless college degree you probably paid for.
I didn't know they offered them for camp counseling, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah.
There's story number one, the geniuses at the IRS. That is government at its best right there, my friends.
Which, it's giving me a whole new perspective on the statute of limitations is also 7 years, right?
Yeah, for most things. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just literally the amount of time the IRS needs to dig through and to get to a solution in whatever matter they're investigating.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I got a college buddy who's on the criminal investigation side for the IRS. So KB, this story's for you, my friend. That's your people. That's your people right there.
Good crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I tease him all the time. How can you live with yourself? You work for the IRS. Okay, so story number 2 for this segment. A little Texas politics. Pull up a picture here to demonstrate what we're talking about here. So the Democrats in the Texas House decided to leave town. Just hopped a private plane. Still trying to figure out who paid for the private plane, by the way.
Yeah.
And whether or not any of these elected officials will then claim this as an in-kind contribution on their campaign finance reports, because it really should be. So Texas Ethics Commission, if you're paying attention, here's Exhibit A, right? If this doesn't show up on any of those people's campaign finance reports, you got some splaining to do. Okay, but anyway, the Texas Dems fled the state, flew up to D.C. Why? Because the legislature, which is in special session right now, is considering a bill that they didn't get to in the regular session on election security. Basically, measures to try to make elections more secure, less fraud, right?
Yeah.
And the Democrats don't like this bill.
Things like a little more voter. You got to show photo ID.
Voter ID. I mean, could we maybe make voting as difficult as it is to get a permanent marker and or Sudafed?
Right.
Okay. Seems like pretty straightforward stuff to me. Okay, so voter ID.
Sure does.
I think it actually expands early voting.
Yes.
So it gives you actually more opportunities to vote. This bill would. The things that the Democrats don't like in the bill, it would do away with 24-hour-a-day voting, which I've been a precinct chair. You've done like poll watching. Okay.
Oh, I'm an election judge.
Election judge. Yep. Okay, so you know how hard it is to get people to do that job.
Oh yeah.
Right. Now think how hard it will be to get people to do the graveyard shift on that job. Right.
Yes.
Hey, thanks for being an election judge. We gave you 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Right?
Exactly.
If you can't get people to watch those polls and voting is open 24 hours a day, guess when the cheaters are going to show up?
Yep.
It's when nobody's watching, right?
Yep.
So this bill would do away with that. It would do away with unsolicited mail-out ballots. So where the registrar just sends a ballot out to basically everybody who's still registered.
Right.
That is ripe for fraud, because if you didn't request it, you don't know it's coming. You don't know to look for it, and the people who do know that it's coming can then intercept it at your mailbox, fill it out for you, and mail it back.
Yep.
It's called ballot harvesting, and it happens in every election cycle, even with the security measures that are in place for absentee voting, which is different. Absentee, you got to sign an affidavit explaining why you can't vote, either during early voting in person or on election day. Then they will send you a ballot. They know you requested it. There's signature verification on it to prove that it is that you got it, you filled it out, and that's your signature, and that's you. Okay, making sure that you filled out your ballot. Okay, these are the things that they don't like.
Yeah.
Okay. The bill also, I think, if I read it correctly, requires employers, if people request time off to go vote, to give it to them. So this actually makes voting easier. What it makes harder is voter fraud.
Exactly.
And these Texas Democrats, not all of them, because I think there are 4 that stayed.
Right.
But These people in this picture right here and others, because I think they took a couple of planes, but that's one of the pictures that's made the rounds on social media.
Right.
They're so irritated by this that they fled the state. And for those of you, I know we got some people that watch this, that are in different states, and Marco down in Australia, although he's from Texas, so he probably understands this. The rules of the state house say you have to have a quorum present in order to conduct business. So what they're doing by not being there is denying a quorum, which means no business can get done, so the House can't vote on this bill. Now, the Senate can, and they already have.
Yep.
So this is their big... I would say it's political theater, because some of it is. There is an aspect of it that's just pure political theater. But it is actually... It is a little bit more than that. They're not doing their job.
Exactly.
You were elected to go to Austin and vote on the bills. You happen to be the minority party, because the Republicans have the majority in the House, which means there's probably going to be some bills that you don't like.
Right.
Okay? You vote against them.
Right.
Right? Or you try to work with the R's and work out your differences, or make it a little better, make it palatable for you, just like they would if they were in the minority, like they're trying to do in D.C. while they are in the minority.
Exactly.
You don't just take your ball and go home, which is what this is.
Exactly.
Well, I can't stop this, so I'm just not going to show up.
Yep.
Meanwhile, their staff are not being paid right now. Their staff is still working.
Exactly.
Their staff is still there.
They're still in Austin.
Okay, still in Austin.
Man in the offices.
Man in the office doing their job, and they're not getting paid because Abbott vetoed the portion of the budget that would have funded the legislature specifically for this purpose, because they were threatening to leave and not do their job. And he's like, okay, fine, then I'm not approving your budget.
Exactly.
So anytime any one of these people tells you how much they care about the working man, well, ask them about the working man and woman in their office.
Right.
Because they're getting screwed over right now.
Yep. Well, and to me, it's turning democracy on its head. I mean, the way that our system of government is set up is you negotiate these problems in the legislature, which they tried to do. They had their suggestions for the bill, and, the Republicans have the majority, and so they listened to their suggestions. The final bill didn't include all their suggestions, which is to be expected.
Right.
And that's the way that our government is set up, right? You
exactly.
You negotiate in the legislature, you get what you get, and there you go.
If you want to set the agenda, if you want the bills to read exactly the way you want to read them, then you've got to win a majority of the seats and take control of the chamber. Right. And don't tell me that you can't win elections, because every one of you people got elected.
Exactly.
with the stuff in place that we're talking about.
Yes.
Actually with fewer protections against voter fraud than this bill provides.
Sure.
So I'll leave it to the viewer, the listener, to decide which one of these stories is the actual joke today. Okay?
Yes.
Because this is just absolutely ridiculous. And then they get up there, and the VP greets them. It goes on this little soliloquy, like calling them heroes and comparing them to the people that marched in Selma.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that.
That is... I didn't march in Selma, but I'm offended for the people who did march in Selma.
Exactly. Right.
No, this is not. This is nowhere near in the same neighborhood of the same ballpark as the civil rights demonstrations, as the people who marched for actual voting rights.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and then Biden called these voting bills, and he didn't specify Texas, but he just talked about several Republican legislatures, I guess. And he said it was the greatest threat to democracy since the Civil War. So
wait.
Can we back that hyperbolic train back up to the station for a minute, Mr. President? I mean, I get it. He probably thinks that he fought in the Civil War, so maybe he thinks that he could compare the two. But even if that's the case, Joe, based on your voting record and your mentor, the Klansman, Robert Byrd, if you had fought in the Civil War, you'd have been wearing gray, by the way. Exactly. So don't try to claim that you're on the right side of history.
Yes. We've had since then Nazi Germany. We've had Joseph Stalin.
Right.
We've had some real threats to democracy. We've had
actual Jim Crow laws.
Yeah, actually,
the real ones that were passed in the 20s and the 30s in the South by whom? their party.
Yep.
These folks.
Yep.
It's one of those things like you almost got to laugh to keep from crying.
Right.
But they get away with it, in my opinion, because people are historically ignorant.
Oh yeah.
They have no sense of context, no sense of history.
Yep.
Just it's not reported with any sort of critical thinking by most of the media.
Yep.
They just seem to parrot whatever, they just report on what was said and don't ever say, fact check anything.
Exactly.
Like, no, Mr. President, there actually have been other threats to democracy worse than this bill.
Yes.
Number one, this bill isn't a threat to democracy at all. It actually, buttresses democracy. It makes democracy safer. It makes it more trusted. It makes it to where even if you lose, you don't feel like maybe you lost because you got cheated.
Right.
Because, you cannot completely eliminate fraud out of elections. It can't be done. But, in elections, there's been shenanigans in elections since, in just modern history. You can go back to like Kennedy, Nixon. Mm-hmm. Nixon's people came to him, and I'm no Nixon apologist, okay? But even Nixon's people came to him and said, there's some really weird stuff that went on. Maybe you should challenge this. And he was like, I think it'd actually be worse for the country if I did that.
Yeah.
We just accept it and move on.
Yeah.
Which is that's pretty big of him.
Sure.
Like I said, I'm no Nixon apologist, but I don't think he gets enough credit for that.
Good point.
So this stuff goes on every election. You cannot completely eliminate it, but that doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to try to minimize it to whatever degree you can. That's what this bill is designed to do.
Of course.
So, it's a total farce.
The people running from democracy are now the heroes, apparently.
Yeah, exactly.
or sorry, not running away, taking private planes away from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in the lap of luxury.
Yeah.
None of them are wearing a mask, by the way.
Right.
A lot of these same people are real big on wearing your mask everywhere. I don't see any on this plane.
And looks like less than 6 feet in between.
Oh yeah,
let's see, about every single one of them. Yeah.
That's about as much COVID talk as I can tolerate. I've never been so sick of talking about anything than that. We're probably long on this segment, so we'll just kind of move on here. It is incredibly hot in here today.
Yeah, that's for sure. I came in from outside expecting some relief, and it just it followed me in. Apparently, it followed all of us in.
Yeah. How hot is it? You might ask.
I was wondering.
Hotter than the hinges on the gates of hell, I think.
Oh.
Yeah. We'll throw back to last week, the show that you
reminds
couldn't. Me. Yeah, exactly. Threw out some Southern phrases last week. Any of them ring any bells to you, or were they some of them new to you?
You know what? Here's the thing: about 95% of them were new to me, and and here's the thing: I've lived in the South my whole life.
Right. So that's why I did that segment, because I thought they were just sort of common. Then I started thinking, you know what? This might just be like common to my family. And a few of them I did hear from some people like, yeah, I'd heard that one before.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were like, no, man, I hadn't heard that one. And I was like, yeah, okay. Well, I've got some, fairly creative people in my family, apparently. Like, because a lot of those were handed down, like from generation to generation. Like I picked up most of those from my dad or my grandpa, a few of them from my great grandpa, who was quite the storyteller. That's another thing that's kind of common in the South. I think it's just something about the culture here or whatever. Like Southerners are good storytellers. They like to hear a good story told. They like to tell a good story.
Yep. That's part of the family traditions is you got to be able to tell a good story. And
and it's kind of oral history, right?
Yeah.
Like you learn things about your family that way. Yeah,
sure.
Got to tell a good story. My great-grandfather was quite the storyteller. And and towards the end of his life, old age kind of catches up with all of us, so mine wasn't 100% what it used to be. I don't know if it was, run-of-the-mill age or senility or Alzheimer's, whatever you want to call it. But he was, as all good storytellers are, probably prone to embellish here and there. But then once the mind kind of started going a little bit, then the embellishments just got to the point where when this guy started talking, it was drop what you're doing and listen, because there's no telling what's coming.
Anything could go.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of his stories started with a line that said, I was down on the Mississippi doing some logging, which he actually did. Okay, I can confirm that. At one point in his life, he was working in the lumber industry. He was, down around like the Mississippi River Delta, cutting down trees, he did do that. Okay, so
he had some cred. Okay.
Like any good story, there's a grain of truth in it, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But if he started a story with, I remember I was down on the Mississippi doing some logging, look out, because there's no telling what was coming. And a couple of my favorites of his, just to sort of demonstrate his way with words. Later in his life, declining health, he was in the hospital. My dad went to visit him. Doctor comes in and says, Mr. Hickman, how are we doing today? And he's like, pretty good for an old man. And he's like, well, really, how old are you? He said, I'm getting up there. I'm so old. Matter of fact, I built the house I was born in.
What?
Now, you may be old.
Interesting.
Okay. You may think you're old, but did you build the house you were born in? Now, that's old. Okay. That's a whole other level. And the beauty of this is the doc looks at my dad because he hears this and has the same sort of befuddled look on his face that Stan just had when I said that. He looks at my dad and goes, how old is he? My dad says, 88. He's like, how old's the house? My dad doesn't miss a beat. 87.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, nobody really knows how old he is, right?
Okay.
I mean,
right.
he's from a generation. I mean, he wasn't born in a hospital. He was born at home on the farm. There's
Sure.
no such thing as a birth certificate. You just sort of had to take everybody's word for it.
No way to verify.
Like, this was the year he was born, right? And then anybody who actually knew, he clearly had already outlived them.
Yes.
So we were kind of just going on his word anyway. So maybe he did build the house he was born in. I don't know. So that's one of my all-time favorites.
That's kind of like the, what is it? Well, I mean, is he Batman or isn't he? I mean, you haven't seen him in the same room.
You can't prove that he's not.
You can't. Yeah.
So that was one of my all-time favorites. It's still used frequently in my family. If you're talking about somebody being old,
Yep.
it just comes up. Well, I bet he's old, but he ain't old enough to build the house he's born in. I'm keeping that one alive.
That is great.
Yeah. So
I'm adopting that one for sure.
Oh, feel free.
Yeah.
Any of the stuff I mentioned last week, feel free. Everybody, let's make those common Southern phrases now. A couple of them, like I said, you kind of have to be careful with. But then my other all-time favorite of my great-grandfather's, I was visiting him, and I can't remember if it was a hospital or like assisted living. It was towards the end of his life, and sitting there kind of talking with him, and on the TV in the room, a trailer comes on TV for the movie Jurassic Park. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
A T-Rex walks across the screen, right?
Right.
Just the big roar of the.
Right.
And I kid you not, great grandpa goes, "Yeah, never seen but one of them in my day. I was down on the Mississippi doing some logging." He was a mean rascal, I tell you. God dang. I thought we were going to have to call a second set of doctors for me and my dad because I laughed till I about threw up. I mean, it was just, and he was dead serious too. Yep.
Just deadpan.
Yeah.
Like
just,
he was saying anything else.
Never seen but one of them in my day. I was down on the Mississippi doing some logging.
That's fantastic.
Just a little personal story to just kind of demonstrate the point. I think Southerners are naturally good storytellers. We have kind of a way with words,
yes,
the turn of phrase, and you probably picked up if you've watched any of these episodes that language and words and writing are important to me. Like I admire good writing. I abhor bad writing. It's one of the things about that I love about like songwriters. Screenwriters for good movies.
Yep.
And TV too.
Right.
I mean, it's tough to write comedy. It's tough to write good drama.
That's for sure.
And so.
Yep.
So yeah, and I work in my day job. I work with words.
Right.
I mean, I'm.
Oh yeah.
Either writing or editing. A lot. Do this show. It's all about what we're talking about, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just one of those things about the South. It's just one more thing that I just love about this kind of weird, wacky section of the country.
Yes.
And we sort of take an odd sort of pride in it too.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. It's a definite point of pride. If you can spin a good yarn.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
the South, that's
yeah.
I mean, if you can spin a good yarn in the South, if you can make a good apple pie, there's some staple dishes, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's just like
Peach cobbler.
There you go.
Peach cobbler would make a rabbit slap a hound dog if it's done right.
That's another one I want to adopt right there.
There you go. Yeah, feel
it.
free. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. How are we for time on this segment? Okay.
Yeah, we got 5.
All right. Then I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. If you've got that article that I sent you, Brett, we can pull that up here. Completely changing topics here. True Romance 4K trailer. So this Tarantino flick is getting kind of the 4K upgrade, which is code for the quest to make more money.
Yes.
How can we repackage this movie and sell it again?
Yep.
But the reason it caught my eye is it's a Tarantino flick. It's probably not one of his best known, I don't think.
I hadn't seen it, and I'm a Tarantino fan, so
right.
Yeah.
Really good cast. It was made, I think, early '90s, if I remember correctly. You got Christian Slater as the lead role back, and that's back when he was really, he was really big. But you got Christopher Walken in it. You got Dennis Hopper.
Oh yeah.
Tom Sizemore before he went completely outhouse rat crazy.
Yeah.
I think it's Patricia Arquette's, one of those Arquettes. I can't remember which one. Brad Pitt has a cameo as this completely stoned out dude that just so stoned he can't get off the couch. And then what I thought was cool about this, so the main character that Christian Slater plays, named Clarence, he has sort of an obsession with Elvis, which I can appreciate.
Right.
But to the point where like he talks to Elvis and he thinks Elvis talks to him. Okay, so he's not. Okay. He's a little bit unhinged.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And there's a scene towards the end of the movie. It's kind of building up to kind of the big climactic ending of the movie, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And he's in this bathroom. And he's looking in the mirror, kind of talking to himself, but also kind of talking to Elvis.
Right.
And over his shoulder, in the reflection, the way it was shot was brilliant, because you see in the mirror reflection a guy in a gold lame suit and the sunglasses and the black pompadour, and you never really see him like full on, like clearly.
Okay.
He's just kind of over the shoulder,
right? And
you can hear him talking, to Clarence.
Okay.
And that guy is Val Kilmer.
Really?
That's the role he played in the movie. You never see him clearly, but he's in the.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's credited as. I think he's just listed as like the king or the voice of the king or something like that.
Okay.
Which I thought was really cool.
Super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. But Tarantino is one of those guys that people either love him or hate him, and I can't really seem to figure out. I mean, I'm a movie buff. We said we're going to talk music, we're going to talk sports, we're going to talk movies. He's one of those guys that people either think he is a genius or a complete hack. They either just love him or hate him, and I can't really pinpoint why that is. I don't think he really. I mean, you can tell, like, some people set out to try to be controversial.
Oh, yeah.
Like they want to be polarizing or whatever, like,
shock value.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's got some of that.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, his movies are incredibly violent.
That's for sure.
Language is off the charts,
Right.
But
no filter.
Yeah, but he's also obsessed with movies. Like he is a movie nut himself.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things in his movies are sort of homages to either a director that he liked or a movie that he liked, or he's more of a film geek than probably anybody you would ever meet. And, and it's like if you take one of the biggest film geeks in the world and then just allow him to make movies, well, that's what you get.
There you go.
Yep. And some of the I know some of the folks that don't like him. They don't like how in a few of his, especially some of his later movies, how they're set in an actual historic time period or telling, based on actual events, but then like you get to the end and it just goes completely off the rails.
Yeah.
Like it's just a complete rewriting of history.
Yep.
Inglorious Bastards is the one that probably everybody knows. Set in World War II, and at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, like the entire Nazi high command just gets slaughtered.
Yep.
Okay. Clearly.
In the most epic way possible.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is gratuitous, but
that's for sure.
And some people like just went off the rails about that. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's definitely historically inaccurate.
Right.
It's clearly a revenge fantasy,
right,
played out on screen. Okay, I accept it for what it is. Like if you're if you're getting your history from Tarantino movies, that's your problem.
Right.
Okay. If you're getting your history from any movie, that's your problem. Okay. And that is a big problem in this country. We talk about things that I'm mildly irritated about in segment 3. Well, there's one. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Stop getting your history from the movies. Okay.
Right.
I love movies and I love history. And I know better than to mix those two. Right.
Exactly.
Braveheart is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Right.
Okay. Say whatever you will about Mel Gibson and all of his own personal hang-ups and imperfections. We've all got them. Mm-hmm. But I love that movie. I think it's a masterpiece of a movie.
Oh, yeah.
And it is probably the most historically inaccurate movie that is based on actual events. I mean, it's the only thing that you can put it in the same ballpark with for inaccuracy are the Tarantino flicks where he completely, changes history at the end of it.
Exactly.
Like he did with Inglorious Bastards. He does it at the end of... what's the one he just did? Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Mm-hmm.
So Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he completely rewrites the Tate LaBianca murders.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
And again, in an epic and gratuitously violent way, because that's Tarantino, right?
Yep.
But they're highly entertaining movies.
Exactly.
I mean, you have to accept it for what it is. He told you in the title, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Right?
Right.
This is a fairy tale.
Exactly.
Every fairy tale starts with Once Upon a Time,
mm-hmm.
right? Unless it's a Southern fairy tale, and it usually starts with, now y'all ain't gonna believe this.
It starts with, I was down on
the Mississippi doing some logging.
Yeah.
That's how Southern fairy tale starts.
Right.
But he told you in the title,
yeah.
right? It's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Right.
And
at least you should know going in, this isn't trying to be historically accurate.
Right. It's not a biopic.
This is exactly. Yeah, this is a different way, a different perspective on what might have happened.
Right. He made up a couple of fictional characters, right?
Yes.
The character that DiCaprio plays, the character that Brad Pitt plays.
Right.
He weaved them into an actual story, what happened to Sharon Tate.
Yep.
Right at the end. Mm-hmm. And he plays it out the way I guess he wished it would have played out.
Yep.
And there you go.
Yep.
Right.
And I would argue that's kind of the fun of watching it too, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
You're kind of tracking because a lot of things are historically accurate, and you're kind of noticing all the, oh, that's cool, he did that because that was a brand that would have been on the shelves back then and that kind of thing. But then there's the turns in the story that you're not expecting, and that's kind of what makes it fun.
Yeah, and it's those attention to detail.
Yeah.
Because yes, there's nothing in that movie that is not really period correct.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, he nails all of that stuff.
Right.
And then at the end, just completely writes history the way he, I guess, wanted history to play out.
Right.
And I haven't gone back through like the Inglorious Bastards. I think I've only seen that once.
Yeah.
But I suspect all of that stuff is dead on.
Oh yeah.
Accurate to the period. To that time period.
That's his obsession, right? Is getting all those little details correct. So yeah.
And he is, he's movie geek enough that he wouldn't allow something like that to happen.
Exactly.
Right. He is that guy. You know, he is the guy. You know, that, like your friend that's obsessed with Star Wars, and you know, you get one syllable wrong in whatever language Chewbacca speaks, and he'll be able to correct you. That's Quentin Tarantino.
Well, a good example. I recently saw a headline and read an article of Bruce Lee, some descendant of Bruce Lee, maybe a daughter, I think, but had made some kind of disparaging comments about how he was depicted in the movie,
right?
In Once Upon a Time, in the fight scene with Brad Pitt's character, the stuntman,
right?
And
which is a fantastic scene, by the way.
Oh, it's an awesome scene.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, well, what I love about Tarantino is that she's you could tell she was kind of trying to lean into the woke, and Bruce Lee, I mean the elephant in the room, right? You know, he's not a white, not a white guy, so we have to, or not an American, so how dare he depict him in some kind of disparaging way, right? And I did love his response, because it was just the facts, right? And he was such a film geek. He came back and and just a history geek, that he comes back and he's like, no, there were plenty of accounts of Bruce Lee was a pretty braggadocious, he was a larger than life kind of character, and he was definitely a bit of a braggart, and he liked to mix it up a little bit, and there are accounts of him literally getting into fights like that with stuntmen. With
stuntmen, exactly.
With an actual exactly like it's depicted.
Yep.
Just going straight back to he'd obviously done his homework.
Right.
And that wasn't just some half-baked scene that he'd just thrown in there because he thought it would be fun to see Brad Pitt throw around. So,
Yeah, exactly. And that should be sort of the formula for dealing with this ridiculous culture that we're in right now.
Right.
You confront feelings with facts.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And you say, I'm not here to validate or invalidate your feelings. These are the facts. This is what I based it on. You don't have to like it.
Right.
I understand that you don't. But it's not going to change anything.
Right.
Right. I mean, you just don't play that game.
Exactly.
He did not get, baited into that debate, because it's the wrong debate to have.
It is.
Because you can't win it.
It is.
Nobody can. Right.
And it's kind of there are legitimate, there is discrimination that happens, and Asian Americans have been subjected to some of that.
Certainly.
That's a horrible thing. But that doesn't have to be woven into every
you don't have to read it into things where it's not.
Exactly.
There are enough examples of it actually happening. You don't have to do this, right? I mean, we did round up Japanese people and put them in concentration camps in this country, right? We did that. You don't have to go reading.
Unfortunate part of history, yeah.
Right. You don't have to read it into stuff. There's enough of it there.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I've never really understood why Tarantino is so polarizing. Yeah. I mean, I just appreciate the stuff that I like and accept it for that. And I don't know why you got to, be in he's a genius camp or he's a hack camp. Like, just appreciate it for what it is. Okay, you like some of his movies. And, yeah, I mean, his movies are, like we said, I mean, a lot of them are incredibly violent, okay?
Yeah.
Our culture is incredibly violent. There is the whole world, is replete with examples. And certainly history is replete with examples of, we're a violent species, okay? So is it art imitating life, or is it life imitating art? Or is it art imitating life imitating art? It's one of those, which came first, chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which, speaking of phrases, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I've never really understood why this is a quandary. Because I read the Genesis account of the creation, and I don't read any account of God putting eggs in the garden and waiting on them to hatch. I read the account of him creating the birds of the air and the beasts of the field, the fish in the sea, then he gets to man.
Right.
So how is this even a question? The chicken came first.
Seems pretty clear.
I think I've solved an age-old quandary here.
There you go.
At least in my mind, it never really was a quandary. Now,
very good point.
Now you can maybe make a case that it should be more of a quandary if you go back to say like, okay, well that was Genesis, but what about Noah, right? Because they destroyed everything and they started over. So what did Noah put on the ark, right? But even then, it said 2 of each. It didn't say the eggs of each. Now he could have taken some eggs, maybe.
Very possible,
right? And just said, "I'll wait for these to hatch."
Right.
But he was told take 2 of each, right? So I think even if you go back to Noah. He opens the door of the ark and lets everybody loose again. There was a couple of chickens, and that's still the chicken came first.
Makes sense to me.
So don't ask me like it's some deep philosophical question. Well, which came first, the chicken or the egg? The chicken came first, okay? The chicken. Right?
Right.
All right. And then it fulfilled its destiny by being delicious at Chick-fil-A.
Exactly.
Right.
It's the ultimate destiny of any chicken, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because if you've ever been around chickens,
I know some people that raised them. Yeah.
In mass quantities, like it's one thing if you got some chickens on your property and they lay some eggs and you get some fresh eggs, they're great. I get it. But if you've ever been near like the mass production of
right,
like I'm from Arkansas, right, Northwest Arkansas, Tyson Foods.
Oh, okay.
There is nothing in this world that smells worse than being downwind from an industrial strength chicken farm. Okay?
Yeah.
It is
yeah.
The only thing, in my opinion, that even rivals it is if you've ever driven past a paper mill.
Really?
Where they make paper. Oh, my gosh.
Possibly up there near Scranton, I hear.
Could be
some paper companies.
There's some great paper companies. We're not disparaging paper companies here. I'm talking about
specifically
the paper mill where they actually take the wood and create paper, turn it into paper. Mm-hmm. It has something to do with they soften the wood, they keep it basically waterlogged, and then they obviously something in the process like it gets treated with all these different chemicals or whatever. It is horrendous. It is the smell is just god awful.
Wow. Did not know that. That's for sure.
Well, I'm all about informing the public here on the major issues.
That's right.
In fact, when I lived in Mississippi and we would come back here to Dallas because Kim's folks were here, there's basically 2 ways to get from where we lived here, and that was either go up to Memphis and go 40 to Little Rock, 30 to Dallas, or go down to Jackson and go 20 from Jackson through Louisiana all the way to Dallas. So we had done the 40 to 30 route a couple of times. It was like, oh, let's try the other way and see if it's any better or faster or less traffic, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So we go down Jackson, get 20, get to Louisiana, and my wife's like, what is that smell? And I was like, it's Louisiana. And she's like, I know, you don't like Louisiana. Because she'd probably heard me badmouth Louisiana ever since we got married. I'm from Arkansas. That's what we do, right?
Of course.
God bless Louisiana. Keep us from being dead last and everything. Right? That's a common phrase. Or maybe it's not. I don't know. But it's a common phrase in my family anyway.
Right.
And she's like, no, seriously. And I was like, no, seriously. I mean, it's paper mills and oil refineries, and you're going to smell this for a long time.
Wow.
Sure enough, we got out of Louisiana, into Texas and kind of cleared up a little bit. And needless to say, that's the only time we took the I-20 route from Mississippi to Dallas.
The whole state just having a stench about it. That's
yeah. I mean, I'm sure because I've got family in Louisiana, and they're probably going to watch this, and I'm going to hear from them.
Yeah.
I know there are parts of Louisiana that don't smell like that. Okay, I get it. I know. Nobody's a bigger proponent of the oil and gas industry than I am. Okay, I got family that work in it, but you can't tell me it doesn't stink. Okay, because it does. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a cost of doing business, I guess, and it's one that I'm willing to put up with.
Right. For
the oil and gas and all the things that are made from oil and gas, but it stinks. Okay, I'm telling you, it does. Refineries.
Not the most fun place to drive through. Huh?
No, I mean, so. So yeah, where was I? Tarantino. Yeah. Sorry, that was quite the rabbit trail we went down there.
Or I was gonna say chicken trail. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't
think they have trails.
I don't think that's a thing.
Yeah, probably not. So, but anyway, yeah. So, yes, Tarantino flicks are incredibly violent. So is Humanity.
There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, I'm not one to say like that we should try to glamorize it, like praise it as a good thing.
Right.
Okay. And I don't think that's what
Right.
he tries to do. I think he's reflecting like, look, there are people that behave this way.
Sure.
Right? I mean, a lot of the characters in his movies are not, the fine, upstanding young men that we all aspire to be. Right. His stories revolve around people who are sort of on the darker side of things. Right. I mean,
not
I think
the model citizens. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, his first big sort of breakthrough was with Reservoir Dogs.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it's about a robbery gone bad. Right. They're thieves. Right.
Yes.
That's the first thing you know about all of these guys. Okay. They
Exactly.
intend to rob people. Right. Shocker. They're not opposed to using violence to get what they want. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I've always been sort of, I guess, kind of a middle of the road guy when it comes to like what I really don't like the term like the culture war stuff. But when people talk about, there's so much violence in movies, there's so much sex in movies, there's so much language in movies and all of that. And yes, there is. And I make a judgment call based on a case by case basis.
Right.
Maybe it should bother me more than it does, but I just sort of, I live in this world, and this is how, this is how a lot of people talk. This is how a lot of people behave. I do my best not to talk that way. I do my best not to behave that way. Do my best not to, surround myself with people that talk or act or think, behave that way.
Right.
But it is there. It does exist. I mean, I can't remove myself from it.
Right.
And I get the argument about sort of garbage in, garbage out,
Right.
So I'm not, advocating like, oh yeah, just anything goes. You just watch whatever you want. No, I think every individual's got to
Use a little discretion.
use discretion, and you come up, there may be some things you're like, nah, this is too much. I can't do this one.
Right.
And I've gotten up and walked out of movies before.
Sure.
I
Sure.
paid the ticket price, went in and was like, nope,
Not
can't
my
do
thing.
this. Yeah.
Yep.
This is too much for me.
Gone a little
And
too
it,
far.
I've done it, more than once for sure. And sometimes it was based on sort of, the content that was on the screen. But I think probably more often it was just the movie sucked. I was like, I'm not going to waste another hour and a half of my life.
My time on this.
You can keep the money, but I want my life back. Right? There's 45 minutes I'm never going to get back.
Yep.
And I remember the other thing that I was going to say about Tarantino when you brought up how he responded to the critic.
Yes.
This girl that was related to Bruce Lee or whatever.
Right.
I just read this earlier this week. He was doing an interview about something else, and somebody asked him about Christopher Nolan's latest flick, Tenet, right?
Yes.
And I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan.
Oh yeah.
Love Christopher Nolan's movies.
Yep.
But
here.
Tenet, I've got to tell you, I couldn't do it. Like, I made it through it. I mean, it's not one I was like, well, this is terrible. I'm getting walking out, right?
Yeah.
Because I was sucked in by the story. But a lot of his stuff is really mind bending, right? Especially his stuff dealing with like the concept of time and all of that. And this one was just, I just couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
And there was something about the way it sounded, like the actual audio of the movie in Tenet, because it's time, it's dealing with like time bending and all of this, and like working backwards through time. And apparently,
right,
like because these guys are working backwards through time, it's almost like listening to like a record going backwards when they're around people that are in the time that they're moving backwards through.
Right.
So I get confused even trying to explain why I can't understand it. But it made understanding what people were saying very difficult for me. And the first time I watched it on an airplane. I was traveling for work. It was one of them. I was like, oh yeah, because I missed it in the theater, and I was like,
right,
it's Christopher Nolan. Flight's long enough, great.
Go for it. Yeah.
And so at first I thought, well, maybe it's because it's just earbuds and the airplane noise and all of this. I was like, I'll watch it again, where I can actually hear it better. Watched it again. I think it was on Netflix or Amazon or something, or on demand or something. Watched it at the house. Same issue.
Really?
And it just, I never could get my head wrapped around it.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I'm almost like more disappointed in myself than I am in Christopher Nolan. It's like, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was.
Yeah.
You know,
I wish I could understand it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Trying really hard.
Yeah. Because but anyway, somebody asked him about Tenet.
Okay.
And Tarantino, all he said was, I think I need to watch it again. And that's all they would say. I think I need to watch it again. And he said it like 2 or 3 times.
That's great.
They're like, okay, all right, moving on. But Christopher Nolan is one of those guys. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, there you go. That should validate you right there. If Quentin Tarantino couldn't wrap his head around it the first time,
I feel a little better.
Yeah.
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 So maybe I am as smart as I thought I was.
Hey, see, there you go. I mean, you're at least as smart as he is. So wherever he falls on the,
we'll see. Yeah, that's definitely a sliding scale. But Christopher Nolan is one of those guys. Like, there's when it comes to like movies, and really music too. It's not for me so much about am I attracted to the storyline. Mm-hmm. It's like if I know Christopher Nolan made the movie, I will watch it.
Exactly.
And it started for me with him with Inception.
Ah, really? Okay.
I was watching Inception in the theater, and I remember about halfway through just leaning over to my wife and going, I'm fighting the urge to stand up and yell at everybody in this movie theater. Like, do you understand how good this movie is? Because the thing that got to me about it at that point when I watched it was like, this is the first truly original idea that I have seen on screen in a long, long time.
Yeah.
Like I like the comic book movies as much as anybody, right? I like all the Marvel stuff. I think is, they're great. They're entertaining. During the pandemic when we were locked up at home, me and my youngest worked our way through the entire Marvel universe. Okay.
Oof.
Yeah, I mean, that's
an undertaking.
It was. Yeah, it was a commitment. But
yeah.
But at some point, it's like, can somebody write an original screenplay?
Right.
Can somebody not just redo something? Mm-hmm. Can somebody not just make a sequel? Can you come up with a truly creative, original idea? And I was watching that going, this is what I've been. It's like one of those things, like almost like you don't realize how hungry you are until you start eating.
Exactly.
Like you don't realize how bad you missed something until you've got it again.
Exactly.
And I was just like, this is fun. And so
this is it.
And then I was like, who made this movie? And it was Christopher Nolan. I was like, okay, well, who is this guy? And I'll watch anything he has to do.
Yep.
Anything the guy's involved with, I'll watch it. If I was made like supreme dictator of all entertainment, then no one would be allowed to make another comic book movie after the Dark Knight trilogy came out, because it's the be-all, end-all of comic book movies. And full disclosure, I'm a Batman guy.
Okay.
I was not a comic book kid, but I would get up at like 6 a.m. on Saturday morning to watch cartoons of the DC characters and all of those. Like, the DC characters were the ones that I was more drawn to than the Marvel characters. I think now that you're watching the movies, I just think the Marvel movies are better made movies than the DC, with the exception proving the rule being the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy.
Christopher Nolan Dark Knight, yeah.
Because I think it cannot be done better than that.
That's what got me into him.
It's
Batman Begins and then going through Dark Knight. Yeah, that's.
And Dark Knight Rises has a very, I don't know what Christopher Nolan's politics are, but it has a very subtle conservative message in Dark Knight Rises. Like when Bane takes over the city and he lets all the convicts out because they were wrongfully imprisoned. Right. And he's like, we're here to give this city back to the people.
Yeah.
And he just turns the people loose.
Populist kind of message. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
interesting.
Yeah, I like I said, I have no idea what Christopher Nolan's politics are, but there's some good messages in there, and I mean the casting, Michael Caine as Alfred is just brilliant.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
When he gives that speech at the end at the tombstones and he's just sobbing, I mean, I get choked up talking about it.
Oh yeah,
I finished that movie and it's like if there's ever going to be a comic book movie that should get an Academy Award for Best Picture, this is it.
Yep.
I mean, it was just
masterfully done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Christopher Nolan's one of those guys for me when it comes to movies. Like
100%.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood's another one. Like,
yes,
I started on Clint Eastwood as a kid because my dad, was a fan of like the spaghetti westerns, the stuff he did with the Italian directors, like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yep.
For a few Fistful of Dollars, for a few dollars more, that whole trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
But when he, when he got control, like when he became like big enough to not just act in the movies, start directing movies, and started making movies. I think Pale Rider is one of the best westerns ever made.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm a huge fan of the movie Tombstone. Okay, but the little gimmick in Tombstone where they used the verse from Revelation about the man on the pale horse and his name was Death and hell's coming with him. Clint Eastwood did that first, and he did in Pale Rider. Okay.
Very good point. Yeah.
Unforgiven, I would put up in the all-time pantheon of westerns ever made, and because there's so many just sort of riding around, shoot 'em up, kind of cowboys and Indians, train robbing kind of movies. That movie really gets into what it is like to point a gun at somebody, pull the trigger, and they're no longer alive.
Yes.
And what it does to a person.
Right.
And the sort of the anti-hero, the guy who's the hero of the movie, but he's morally ambiguous. Clint Eastwood is the master of that, and William Money.
100%.
And Unforgiven is maybe one of the best anti-heroes ever on a screen. So there's a few people like that. Clint Eastwood was one. I'm Robert Redford. I'll watch pretty much anything he's involved with. Got hooked on him watching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yes.
Yeah, Robert Redford and Newman. And then like the same thing though, like with music, like anything Tom Petty's involved with.
Yeah.
Even if it's not him singing, like if I know he helped produce this record, I'll listen to it. Even if I don't, I'll listen to it. Right.
If he signed off on it in some form or fashion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's worth looking into. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we've covered a lot of stuff today. Special
Across
thanks.
the Mississippi and back again.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't do any logging, but
we'll get to that next time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Special thanks to Schrute Farms for sponsoring today's show.
That's right.
Thank you to JPK Network, Brett, Stan the Man, and we will see you next week.
Sounds like a plan.